How's it going, folks? My name's Matthew, aka EZBOT, and today I want to talk about modular synth case design. I think this is a really interesting topic. It's something that I have conversations about all the time, online mostly, but I have them pretty often with students in private lessons, but I also have them just like in Discord chats and on forum chats and with my friends and at shows, especially with other performers. This is discussions that we have all the time because designing a case is an art. There's a skill check with designing a Eurorack case, and there's even a skill check in buying your first Eurorack case. And let me give you a little backstory about myself really quick, and so I can I even forget what that word is, but basically maybe give some weight to my opinion. I worked at a modular synthesizer store for roughly 5 years. I worked the showroom floor. I sold modular synthesizers all day long, 5 days a week. And then eventually I did modular synth demos and got off the floor and did more like case building and demonstrations for video projects. But I sold countless Eurorack starting cases, Eurorack modules, I mean, all sorts of synthesizers. It's what we did at the shop, right? We just sold synths. But the discussions I had every single day with people who were either extremely skilled at Eurorack already or just production in general, to people who are brand new and having to find a way to communicate certain ideas to people who are just looking to get into Eurorack. Those are conversations that I had to have with people all the time, and same with my coworkers. There was a core group of us at the synth shop who were really hardcore into Eurorack, and it was a passion for us. Eurorack is still a passion for me. Although you see on this channel, if you follow this channel a lot, then you'd see there's a lot of Electron, and there's a lot of like MA Tracker and different Grooveboxes because that's my preferred method. But when I do play on Eurorack, I tend to build myself a Groovebox, and I even tell people not to do that pretty regularly because it's probably one of the harder things to pull off and still enjoy your case. So let's talk about that for a second. What do you do when you're building your case? And let's take a look at the case that I have on the table. This is a really fun and interesting topic, and I have some very choice stuff going on here. I've accomplished a massive amount in a very small amount of space in this case, and I think that it's a very usable live performance case. I do think this would benefit from being paired with an external effects box, like an Octatrack, for instance, which is something that I pair everything with. But you could pair it with all sorts of stuff. A DJ mixer or something would do great with this too. I do think it could use a little bit of external effects. But that being said, that's just, that would make, I need the case to be a little bit bigger, or I could use the blue boxes effect. So it's like, it's not a necessity, but it would help. But I just want to talk about this topic. What do we do? Do we build a Groovebox? Do we build an effects processor? Do we build a bloop blop bleep box that makes weird sounds, and then we take snaps of that or little clips of that, and then we process it through other pieces of equipment? Do we use it as a send return? Do we build a megalith synthesizer that sits on a wall? And like, how do we go about this process? And how do you manage this experience? What's a good price, or what is the price point for getting into building a case? And all of that, I think, is just like really excellent conversation and stuff that we don't talk about very much on my channel, but I wanted to address it today in a roughly maybe less than an hour. So this will be a shorter stream today, but just to give you an idea. So like, say you're building a Groovebox. What's going to go into your Groovebox case? How big is your case got to be for that? I would say a pretty decent size, unless you want to forego all of your modulation, like hands-on modulation. This is a really important part of Eurorack design. So when you're building out a Eurorack case, what's really fun about Eurorack is the fact that we can design anything we want, but also the fact that we get to have hands-on control over everything that we do, right? We can have as many modulators as we want. You could have a mono synth with 10 LFOs, or you could have a synthesizer with 10 VCOs and 1 LFO. Like, you can do whatever you want. You could have everything be sample based. You could have everything be digital. You could have everything be analog. Like, you can just do whatever you want in this format, considering space and budget. Now, the reason why this case is such a good example for this discussion is this is probably the most popular Eurorack case of all time. I would say. This is an IntelliGel 7U case. They even made a newer version of it, which I'm dying to get my hands on. IntelliGel, if you're watching this, please help me. I want your V2. But this case is awesome. It's when it first came out, it was about $6.99. It's a 7U case. What is it? A 104? Yeah, 104 HP 7U case. And it's just big enough for you to accomplish most of your goals. What's cool about it is you can buy another one and you can attach them to each other and you can build this, like, you know, this connecting, one's sitting up and one's on the ground. It's a really nice experience, and it's what I used to have, but I actually sold one of them and bought a 9U, another case. Not as useful of a case as this one, it turns out to be. But anyway, I think this is important. So say this is you're starting out, you're getting a case, maybe not even starting out, you have a 7U case, you've had it for a while, you're putting some modules into it. If you're going to build a Groovebox, we'll use that as our first analogy. What do we need to do to build a Groovebox? Well, you need a sequencer, a powerful sequencer that can sequence every single voice in your case, and it needs to be able to sequence melody, and it needs to be able to sequence drums, right? So it needs to be able to do both those things decently well. Now, that means that you have to have something, if you're doing, like I was saying, we're using Groovebox as our analogy here, or as our example. The Groovebox is going to want to have, like, do you need a chord synthesizer of some sort? You don't need it. You don't need it. Do you want it? Yes. Do you enjoy having something like that? For sure. Having something that can do chords is really nice. I've actually accomplished that in this case with the Monumatic, which is a really nice sounding little polysynth, and I've paired it with the Cosmic Debris. And this is a whole nother discussion, like pairing voices with different effects, but I give discrete ideas their own setups. This is the Dub Tech, this is the chord section of the Dub Techno case. And so it has a polysynth with an awesome reverb delay. And this is going to accomplish most of my goals for my Dub Techno sound in this particular case. But you know, you're going to want probably full voices for like a Groovebox style case. Now, when it comes to like drums, you have a couple different options. You can do a bunch of drum modules, which is going to be very expensive, and it's actually going to like kind of pigeonhole you into the sound of those drum modules, depending on the kind of drum module it is. I did have something like that set up here. I ran out of space doing that, and I opted for a sampler, just a small sampler, because especially with this rig that I'm doing, I didn't need to have a bunch of discrete drum sounds. I needed to be able to have these any sound that I want, and I also needed more than just drums. And so the sampler accomplishes that goal for me. So I put in this 1010 Bitbox Micro. This is a really common, popular device, and it also does MIDI. MIDI is something really useful in Eurorack nowadays, but it wasn't, 5 years ago. So along with this case, we have, all the drums covered in one module. I have a polysynth in here. Then I have a new little treat here. This is the Odessa. And this was sent to me by Chaos Devices pretty recently, and I've just been getting familiar with it. I absolutely love this oscillator. And this is a really cool oscillator. We're going to discuss this one further in another stream. But what I really like about this particular type of voice, this is an additive synthesizer. But what's great about this style of synthesis, this is like more along the line of an FM synth or a complex oscillator. That's the kind of oscillator this is. This is a sound maker. Like, it can do weird stuff. It can do percussive sounds. It can do like FME sounds. It can do sound destruction, all that kind of stuff. It covers a lot of territory, and that's why it's here. And that's why I've given it so much space in this case, is because it can cover a massive amount of territory. Just like the sampler can, just like the chord synthesizer can. So I'm making these deliberate choices in this case with modules that can cover a lot of territory that don't pigeonhole me into any specific category, even though this is built for Dub Techno. But that was what I was thinking. I was like, I would love it to be able to do more than just that, but I did build it with that genre in mind. Over here, I've got a digital oscillator with an analog filter. My ultimate and favorite combo of any synthesizer is digital oscillators with analog filters, whether it's a keyboard, whether it's Eurorack or a monosynth, or desktop synth. That's what I prefer. I like that experience. Digital oscillators give you the flexibility of staying in tune. They also give you the flexibility of having these crazy sounds that you can get from them very quickly, very easily, because you can change algorithms and stuff like that. This happens to be a complex oscillator made by Noise Engineering, and this is a dual filter. Also something I highly recommend. Dual filters are really powerful because not only can you run them in parallel or in serial, which is not what I'm doing here. I'm running this in parallel, so I'm getting 2 filters in one module. I can do a lot with it because of that. Because I have those options, I can do sound design with the second filter, or I can have another second analog filter. It's a 12 dB, I believe, analog filter. Dual VCA paired with that modulator. So now, like, down here is where things get a little bit more interesting in this particular case. I would prefer to have a larger mixer than the blue box. I would prefer to have a large mixer that's like spans this vicinity. And I would enjoy so many different mixers that are out right now. Trust me, there's so many. WMD's performance mixer, the Exelon mixer, the new, what is it? Union Audio, I think it's called. Anyway, beautiful mixers out right now. It's a great year for Eurorack mixers. But this mixer gets the job done. It has USB out. It can be an audio interface. It can also record your performances, and you can use MIDI to it. So I could use MIDI faders and stuff. It's got a small footprint. It's doing the job. Over here, we have an extremely powerful sequencer, one of the most powerful Eurorack sequencers of all time, in my opinion. And it's one of I'm most familiar with it of all the Eurorack sequencers that I own. My NerdSeek with a couple of expanders. Got a chord expander, a CV expander, a MIDI expander, an I2C expander if I wanted it to communicate with things like ERA 301 or Monom devices type stuff. None of that stuff I own anymore because that stuff was expensive and I traded it for other gear down during my tenure with Eurorack. But I've kept my NerdSeek and I will keep it forever. Trackers are a passion of mine. And so that kind of like just describing this case, not because it's like, hey, check out my case, this is so cool. It's more like, hey, check out these ideas in this case. What are we doing here? We have a polysynth, we have a noisemaker, we have basically an analog synth or a complex voice with an analog filter. We have some modulators, VCAs. We have a mixer, we have a sampler, and then we have a powerful sequencer. And that's what's in this case, and that creates a Groovebox. So this case, and one other thing that's really powerful about these ideas in this Groovebox case is the fact that I can save these patches. The NerdSeek, I can save this project and return to it. My samplers section, when I boot this up and boot this down, it'll have my kit there waiting for me. I can save my kits. My mixer, I can save a mix, how I have things done. This has EQs in it and stuff like this. This is a very deep Groovebox. It has a lot of the features you would find in an Electron box or on my MA Tracker or on an MPC. Like a lot of that stuff is in this case because of some choices that are being made here. Fitting everything into a smaller case is the art form. The art form is not just having like the budget. Imagine we all had infinite budgets. We would still all be picking a lot of similar modules with each other, like whether or not they were expensive or cheap. It wouldn't be about the budget. If we could just pick whatever we wanted, we would be designing some similar looking cases if we were going for similar ideas. Like if we were going for a Groovebox, we would still be picking, you know, a sequencer that can do both drums and melody really well and save your progress. That would be important for a Groovebox. This can be an improvisational case, but to me, this is still in that semi-improv style, like Electron does with their workflow. You can hear it again really quick, kind of like what I have going on in this case already, and it sounds pretty powerful. A really nice sound. Everything is hands-on, really groovy to play with. You can queue up all sorts of different clips or patterns, however you want to think about it with the NerdSeek. Really powerful sequencer, one of the best to this date. Still continues to be one of the best sequencers you can get in Eurorack, in my opinion. Now, when you're building another style of case, like say we're like, forget about my Dub Techno case, you're building an effects processing case. This reminds me more of like, if you're familiar with Dataline, Chank, who used to work for Electron. It was my, I love Cenk. I think what he's doing, he got some new software out recently. Looks really cool, Quad Track, which I need to pick up and check out on this stream. I would love to do that soon. But Cenk used to really inspire, I mean, he still inspires me, but his older videos inspired me deeply with Electron. And he would have this like Analog 4, Octatrack, Digitech 2 or Digitech 1, a Rhythm, and then he would have a small Eurorack skiff. And I was always like, what's in Data Line's Eurorack skiff? Love his music. He's got this mix of Eurorack stuff going on. It was just a bunch of like delays and VCAs and stuff. So this like send and return processing skiff, I think those skiffs, the budget can be much smaller for, and you can stick with these simpler ideas. So I've done this countless times with smaller Eurorack cases, like the IntelliGel palette case. Oh man, one of the best cases ever. And there's another thing about like picking your case and how big it is. So many people I talk to when they're building their first like Eurorack case, they're like, I want to get a 6U 52 HP case. Like, I forget, there's a brand out there that's got these beautiful little cases. Anyway, and they'll get these small cases and they're thinking, I'm gonna get the small case, I want to spend too much money, I don't want to go crazy, you know, I've never done Eurorack before. And when I would be approached with that, I'd be like, of course, let me show you the section that has the smaller cases. And then as we get talking, it'd be like, you know, I do want to tell you, like, this is not how this goes. Like, you don't, you know, buy a little case and that's all you do is put modules in your little case and that's it. You're going to buy more modules than that. It's not going to fit in your case. You're going to want maybe a bigger case. We're going to need a bigger boat is kind of the situation once you get into Eurorack. You know what I mean? Jaws is like coming for you and your wallet. There's no doubt. And I'm right about that. And I'm usually right about that particular thing in Eurorack is that you do kind of want to get a medium-sized case, if not a larger case, I think. I think the really small focus cases are not great for new users as much because I think there's still so much growth to be done, and Eurorack has so much trading that can happen within the community. So you can get the larger modules, they take up so much space. So you already need a larger, you can't fit very many like Moog modules. Like if you're going to take a Mother 32 or a DFAM or a Labyrinth or something and put it in Eurorack case, it's going to take up the whole thing, right? The whole bottom row in one of these smaller like 52 HP cases or a pallet case. And so having a larger case is going to just give you more room to breathe. Just because a module is large doesn't mean it's going to be the most expensive module. You know, Moog stuff is only $600 and it takes up, 40 HP or something? And it's like other modules, 40 HP could be $5,000. Like it's completely possible. So I think giving yourself some room to breathe with your Eurorack case is usually an extra like $100 to $200 investment in the case and opens up this huge world for you to do all sorts of different ideas. So I do recommend for people who are new getting into Eurorack that you choose a larger than a small case to give yourself some room to breathe. That's where this particular case comes into play. This IntelliGel 7U case has been a very, very popular case. This is the Make Noise case, but the reason people liked this was the built-in I/O and the 1U row that allowed you to put IntelliGel stuff in all these other brands that eventually came about for the 1U case. Just get multiple small cases. Some people do get multiple small cases, 256, and I think that is cool, and you can keep these really focused ideas, but I think it is more useful, in my opinion, to be able to put all these modules together and have a good time with that. Not necessarily a giant case. But back to the discussion of of designing your case and why it's an art. There becomes this art form and the skill check when you're designing a Eurorack case, when you're saying like, well, how many VCAs do I need? Like there's that gimmick, it's a meme almost. I think Mylar Melodies like created this meme of like, you can't have too many VCAs, right? I think it was a really popular YouTube video that he made. It's a really good video, so I recommend you watch it because he makes a lot of good points on why you can't have too many VCAs. I'm sure DivKid talks about this all the time too. There's some truth to that. There's also some not truth to it as well. Like I think that he's right fundamentally. Yes, you can't have too many VCAs. Like you're not going to regret it unless you run out of space. But you also don't need to overload on utility modules to have a good time in Eurorack. some sequencers offer you the modulation and the ability to control the depth of the modulation from the sequencer. There's lots of Eurorack sequencers like that. The Hermod Plus, for instance, lets you control the depth and has envelope generators and stuff like that. So one of the skill checks is understanding that fact that you want to have VCAs, but you don't need them for everything. You may want one because you want to do sidechain ducking. And so you have an extra VCA, maybe it's a stereo VCA, so that you can route a bus of audio. And then having a bus of audio, that's an expensive thing to do in Eurorack too. But you could route a synth of some sort, like maybe this chord synth goes into a VCA that has bipolar inputs. So you can send inverted envelopes. Or it has a bipolar attenuator, I mean, so you can invert an envelope on it. That would be really cool. Then you could do sidechain ducking from another envelope generator. That's when you want to have stuff like that. Certain utilities you need to build certain concepts in your Eurorack case. So what I like to do is like try to like min-max my voice amount first. Like how many voices do I need? I really want to have, I need to cover these particular bases, and then everything else I'm kind of like going through what I have on my table and being like, does this fit? Like this, the art is like playing these Lego games with your Eurorack case. It's like, oh, if I take this out and I put this one in, I lose this, but I gain this. What can I do with that? And this is kind of the same mindset, I think, that people have to be in to play with like teenage engineering stuff, right? Like playing in here is kind of similar to going over to an OPXY or an OPZ or whatever teenage engineering piece of equipment, or an M8 tracker, for instance. These smaller cases, these smaller instruments that kind of made these choices for you. M8 tracker has a lot more flexibility than the teenage engineering stuff, but this has a lot less flexibility. Once it's set in stone, your flexibility with your case goes down dramatically. Once you put it in, it's kind of done. It's kind of like that idea gets cooked in there. Of course you can move modules, like whatever, but once you start patching, you don't want to do that. Like once you get a patch going, it sucks to unpatch all your stuff all the time. It's very slow. I do have some opinions, and recently I did this poll on my Patreon. If you're not on the Patreon, I don't know why you're not. It's the best Patreon on the entire internet, but I did this poll on my Patreon, and I was asking like, what kind of content should I be working on? What kind of stuff are you guys interested in? All these people on the Patreon, and got some great responses. And one of them was like, do you want to hear my deeply opinionated thoughts on different things? And got quite a few people saying they like that idea, just hearing deeply opinionated stuff. And I have a lot of opinions that I had to withhold from people when I worked at the synth shop that I no longer have to, because I completely work for myself. I'm happy to share them with you, and I do, I think, all the time. But man, well, I totally was about to go down this tirade on something. Well, I think it's important, of course, to set aside a budget when you're building your case. But I also think that it's important to give yourself that headroom when you're building your case. So those things in mind, they kind of decide what you're gonna do and like what options you have, right? So we want to have a certain amount of growth, but we do also have our budget. So the question is like, do you get like used modules or do you buy new? And one of the cool things about Eurorack is the fact that you can buy used modules all the time. You can trade modules all the time. It's a really cool part of this community, the Eurorack community, is the fact that your modules can like go in and out all the time, constantly trading them with other people in the community. Everybody wants to try everything else, and you can with Eurorack. And I love that about this particular format, is the fact there's always innovation, and there's always innovation, there's always people wanting to try something new, and the value of Eurorack stuff kind of stays at the same price point as it is new. Like you knock off like 40-50 bucks on a module when you're trading them back and forth. So it doesn't feel like you're really losing money. It feels like you put money into it, and then your money kind of sits and stays there, and you get to trade stuff around. Not every like hobby is like that, or every style of music production is like that. Like a used Digitech doesn't go for the same price as like used module. We're talking $50 off a module, but hundreds of dollars off of like an Electron box, you know, or an MPC when they're used. That's completely different. And so I really do like that. Okay, I'm starting to remember like some of my opinionated thoughts. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked when I was talking about the OP1 and these choices that are made for you. I think patching your case. This is something to think about when you're doing this. When you're patching your case, leaving your case patched, building your actual dream synthesizer means committing to doing an idea. And this is what I was talking about with the teenage engineering thing, and it was like I got sidetracked because I'm drinking coffee and talking to a camera. But when you build your case and you start patching your case out, I think it's important not only to really like what you've got and like to read the manual and do all that stuff, you have to, but it's really important to patch something up and leave it patched so that you can like play with that patch and get familiar with these modules. So there's a couple different approaches you can do to stuff like this. Some people would get like a bunch of colored patch cables and say like, I'm going to use a bunch of red patch cables to go to my complex oscillator, and I'm going to patch everything into all the patch points, and then I'm going to wrap it up and it's going to be there and I'm going to have access to those patch points. And this is an approach that I actually find very respectable because it's a lot like buying a Groovebox or buying a synthesizer. Everything is patched. You can break the patch when you want to, for sure, but also things are patched up so you have faster access to just like writing music. So I like that idea. The idea of unpatching all your stuff all the time is the same thing to me as opening a new project on a Digitech or an Octatrack or whatever, an MPC, and starting a brand new project every single time you want to make some music. The likelihood of you accomplishing anything in that process is really low because you are letting go of all this energy and time that you spent building the original project that you had in mind. Like setting up your mute groups and setting up your sound sources and setting up your samples and all that, you know, using an analogy from other boxes. You want to kind of commit in this format. And so the art form of picking your modules and getting familiar with what kind of module you need and don't need is tough. It's a hard thing to do. My dog just opened my studio door. My dog can open doors now. So one of the things that I do try and practice is like finding modules that allow me to save the current state so I can reload that state. I think this has been really useful for people like me who are coming from this Groovebox mentality. So like the NerdSeek, because I can save the progress, it allows me to like put this down and go and do something else and come back, or power it down and move it around and come back. And it's extremely useful for me. And there's not that many modules that let you do that. And I've found 3 of them and thrown them into this case now. Now, picking like complex sound sources is another thing that I think is really important in Eurorack design. So like getting yourself a couple of like essential items. So when you're building out like your music studio, for instance, if you were like just getting into music production, you were probably thinking, I need a polysynth, I need a monosynth, I need a drum machine, I need an audio interface, I need a computer, and I need a digital audio workstation, and maybe a microphone. And like those are the things that you would need to like have your studio. When you're building out your Eurorack case, you're often thinking, I need a mixer, I need some filters, I need VCAs, I need modulators, I need voices, I need effects, I need a case, I need speakers and audio and blah, blah, blah. All that other stuff should already be there. But you have to think about these more specific options. And I think if you can find modules, I'm a big fan of bigger modules. I like bigger modules. I think there's more thought put into them rather than tiny little modules and having a million tiny little modules. The bigger modules just tend to do more and just have more in them, I guess. They're usually more expensive as well, though. But I'm a big fan of having those larger modules and wiring them up and then going really deep on them. Hang on one sec. I'm just going to have this play for a sec and close my studio door. Hold on. God bless the Doge, but what are you gonna do? Buy once, cry once. That is a good, that's a good point. Something else that I think is useful when you're designing your Eurorack case is getting familiar with something like VCV Rack. VCV Rack, Max for Live, Bitwig's The Grid, Reactor, all of these Pure Data, all of these like node-based software instruments are going to give you a huge insight into what you should do when you're building a Eurorack case. I remember when VCV Rack came out and it was free, and it is free, right? But you can buy stuff on it as well. But when VCV Rack came out, it came out just like right before COVID, and like right around this like huge boom in Eurorack, and COVID was a huge part of the boom in Eurorack, there's no doubt. But VCV Rack came out, and you could get these, clones of Eurorack modules, and now there's tons, and there's a whole ecosystem, and people are making businesses out of VCV Rack. But it helped grow the Eurorack community deeply because people could practice building their cases. They could learn the art form of building cases. There's also, obviously Modular Grid is a good place to go, but Modular Grid is like, you're not patching stuff up like you are in VCV, so you can't really see what it's going to sound like. You can just see how expensive it is and the power draw, and really just lose yourself picking where things go. The art form of picking where things go is a whole nother thing unto itself. And I find it's like borderline hilarious how deep my brain goes when I'm like picking the location of a module in a case, and just how ridiculous it is because they are all right here. Like they're just putting this over here and then patching from here to here isn't really going to do very much. Like it's not really going to change things, but the granularity at which a Eurorack user goes to like get things sounding perfect is, I don't know, quite deep, and seems a bit gratuitous at times, but that's a part of the fun and the process in it. I'm curious when for people who are here in the chat, because this is going to be a shorter stream today, for people who are in the chat, when I say that designing a Eurorack, like picking out your modules and designing your Eurorack case is an art form, like what do you think of that statement? Like what do you think of when you hear that? And do you agree with that? I'm sure you do. If you're a Eurorack user, you probably really connect with that idea because it's probably been, a long time of you going in and out of these modules. But what does it mean to you? Like, what do you think of the art idea in it? What is the art form in it? To me, a lot of it is about understanding synthesis and also letting go of ego. I think there's a lot of ego involved in a Eurorack case. Honestly, it's probably the most ego-driven thing in electronic music is like the Eurorack community. And I think a lot of it is people buy the wrong stuff a lot. I think I found that when I'm looking at people's Eurorack cases, I'm like thinking to myself, like, of course I'm not you, and I know like everybody has their own expression, everybody's doing what they do. But my opinion is that I think people are choosing things based on a bit of a peacocking type experience, a bit of being a little overly cerebral about what they're doing with their Eurorack case. Eurorack is not just about the expression of you creating your own synthesizer, but it's also about being practical. There are things that are practical in Eurorack. Eurorack has the best sounding effects, in my opinion, in Eurorack format. It's basically guitar pedals that we can access very easily without having a pedal board. Pedal boards are incredibly annoying. They're on the floor, for one, and they're also gigantic. Eurorack cases can be small, but they have the same amazing sounds as the pedals do. And it's like most of the Eurorack manufacturers are guitar pedal manufacturers first, and then became Eurorack because of the COVID boom of Eurorack. And another reason for it is because the power supply, like you don't have to follow all these regulations building Eurorack modules, because the person who designs the case designers, they're the ones who have to do all the power regulatory stuff. So people could just build Eurorack modules and forget about the annoying part. And so there was a huge boom because of that. But I do, and don't shoot the messenger about the cerebral idea. This is just my opinion for one thing, but I do believe that this happens a lot. And I don't mean it in a way to attack anybody in particular. I am at fault here. I'm calling myself out for sure. There's a lot of modules. They do a lot of things. Through Zero FM to the moon, people would choose. Through Zero FM was just this thing that was just like huge for a year or two. Everybody had to have Through Zero FM oscillators. Why? Why did you need a Through Zero FM oscillator? Because they were coming out and they were new. That's why you needed it. Not because it made a better sound with that oscillator. It was just another thing to have. You can make some more bellish tones with it. It's not necessary, but it is cool. You know, it's a nice thing to have, but it's not necessary. So it's like stuff like that would happen all the time in the Eurorack community, and this is a bit of the art form. Is also like learning that. Like, am I putting this in my case for ego, or am I putting this in case because it works? So for me, I would like to have as many drum sounds in here as possible, but it's more practical, as I was mentioning in the beginning, for me to put in the Bitbox Micro. That's practical. That is like me letting go of ego and just picking something that is just easy, or just gets the job done. Or that's the way I'm viewing it, because what I really want to do is flex on how cool of drum modules I have, but it's impractical because they don't make the right sounds, right? Like, that's what I want to do, is use the modules and have them available. Maybe not flex is the wrong word, but just use them. And maybe that's not an ego is not a bad thing to have either. But I do mean that there's a lot of like cerebral attitude that goes into designing Eurorack, where people with finances and, you know, good brains, however you want to put it, buy modules they don't need to make sounds they don't like. And this happens a lot in Eurorack, and I see it all the time. And I saw it all the time when people come to the shop. And of course, I want people to buy Eurorack and have fun and experience it. But a lot of it is about, like, it has all of these things that it can do, but I don't use them. So what does practicality in Eurorack look like? To me, it looks like an oscillator that sounds good to you and stays in tune well. That's practical. Could be analog, could be digital. It depends on the sound that you want. A good sounding filter. Synthesizers are all about filters. Oscillators really mean jack compared to the oscillator, or to the filter. I think filter outweighs oscillator any day to me. The VCA, you know, maybe it's got enough jacks. That's really all that's important with the VCA. Like, you know, good sounding VCAs is like very, very rare. So just having a VCA. Modulation. This is a really important one. Do you understand how to use this modulator? Can you use it quickly? Can you have fun with your modulation? If you cannot answer yes to any of those questions, you are picking the wrong modulator. You're picking some crazy ass modulation module that does a bajillion different things, but none of which you get or grok or will ever use in a musical context, possibly, right? I've told you this is very opinionated, but I think that happens a lot to people. I think I think simple is good. Get it complex later. You know what I mean? Get like super complex stuff later once you feel really, really comfortable with what you're doing, and acknowledge the fact that you're using something really complex because you've gotten to a place where you need it, not because it looks cool or it sounds cool or because it was the next thing, like Through Zero FM or something like that. And I mean that. I mean, I really believe that you're going to make better sounding music this way. I think eventually, the longer that you are in Eurorack, the further you get to a spot where this is the perspective. Like, and this is just my experience talking with other Eurorack users, that you will, from the conversations I've had with other Eurorack users, it seems to be that we all connect on the same idea that, like, you know, we like a lot of really cool stuff. We start to understand, you know, these different modules and their different functionalities and stuff like that. But picking things that just kind of gets the job done and lets you have fun with the knob, and like turn the knob and it doesn't make the sound. When I turn this decay envelope, it does change the length of which I'm hearing my voice, or I'm hearing the filter cutoff go. Like, that hands-on control that's so important in Eurorack in my opinion. Like being able to actually turn a knob and feel it is the whole point to me. But when we go into this crazy modulation stuff, there are some modules I'm thinking of, and I don't want to call any brands out or any people who have bought these brands, where I was just like, why? Why do we have it so crazy? It's so deep. It takes so long to program. Who has the time and energy to do this? Who's available to do this? Like, we need to take a step back and design things that are more approachable and usable. You know what I mean? Again, people on the Patreon asked for my deep opinions, and I have a lot of them, and they're not right. They're not right at all. They're just mine. They just belong to me, and that's it. So take it with a grain of salt. If it resonates with you, kudos. If it's annoying, sorry. I feel how I feel about this. I have a lot of experience in this community, and I have a ton of experience building Eurorack cases. So I've got a lot of opinions from that experience. Going back to like what I have in this case and why this works for me. Like why I'm able to like, this sounds really good to me. And I have to say, like, this actually is more flexible and more hands-on and way harder to program than my Electron combo. And I do think that it sounds like my Digitakt Digitone put together. I think that this one-ups the sound quality. I do. I think my Digitakt Digitone are my favorite devices in my studio. Like that combo is the best with the Octatrack. Chef's kiss, you know, amazing. But I do think that these effects and these oscillators and these analog filters and these dedicated concepts that are in here, they lend themselves to a better sound. And if you can wrangle that better sound and utilize it in a useful way, then this is a great format for you. So I think building a synth is a great format, right? If say like we got a bunch of oscillator selections and you're like, in a good synthesizer, you would have multiple oscillators and you could choose a wavetable on some oscillators. You could choose a digital oscillator. You can choose an analog oscillator and all these different waveforms, right? This is a typical synthesizer things when you're building a synthesizer and thinking in that fashion. So we'd have maybe a couple oscillators, maybe we have a couple filter choices. Then we have our VCAs, then we have our modulators, then we have our mixer, and we have our sequencer, and we have our effects section. That to me is a great case. That's a great case. Do I need any more than that? No, I don't think you do. I think that is a fantastic thing to have on your desk, use it to record sometimes, get snippets. That's the art, building your own custom synth. Then there's building the Groovebox like I've done here, which is an extremely flexible Groovebox. Big shout out to Odessa for being super sick and being incredibly flexible and making all sorts of bleepy bloopy type sounds, which I love for modular and techno in general. And there's building effects cases, like I was mentioning, Dataline doing a Chank from old Electron Chank, and just sending out stuff from like existing boxes, like taking a ToneVerk and using a send return or an Octatrack send return or an MPC. I think that's a really great format too, and that requires even less thinking. You just buy good sounding modules and chain them, and then throw a couple modulators in there and maybe some VCAs if you want to do some gating or control the volume of those modules. This is the art form. The art form is knowing synthesis. So like you have to know synthesis, and then you have to also know the format. And when you put those two tools together and the experience, of course, then you get to understand this, like the art of building a case. Because you can just buy modules and throw them in a case. And to me, that is not building a case. Collecting modules and throwing them in a case for storage is not building a case. Building a case is a thoughtful exercise where you take modules out, you give them purpose. They all are doing something. They all have a meaning and they all have their own value. And the other modules are unnecessary in your studio after you've constructed your case. They're just hanging there waiting for their turn to get used and to get given purpose. But just taking and collecting modules and throwing them into a case, that to me isn't building a case. That's just where you're putting your modules. This exercise, and that's why a lot of people buy multiple cases, is so that they can do this exercise where they take modules out of their larger case, put it into a smaller case, and they create these focused formats. The smaller the case, and this is contradictory to what I was saying earlier in the stream, The smaller the case, the more focused the exercise becomes. Oftentimes, the better the sound you get from the case. And that's because you get out of your own way. You don't have too many modules interrupting your workflow. You're not trying to do too much because there isn't too much to do. And that saves you from making terrible sounds. And so I think that's great. But I don't think it's the right move to have a small Eurorack case in the beginning unless you're already extremely experienced. Unless you're a pretty advanced producer and you're very particular about what you're doing. I know some people like that. There's one in the chat, I think. Femto is somebody I would consider who knows that well and keeps a small case. It's one of the moderators here. It's a great person to talk to about this. But having these like focused formats is really useful. I think later in the game, earlier on, if you're new to Eurorack, I think it's better to have a medium-sized case. And for you can use some of it as storage and some of it as your focus area. But to kind of like, you're going to have to explore, buy and sell some modules. But don't let yourself get taken over by the hype of what it can do. That is like that same idea of buying into a product on the hope that you get an update. You're hoping that you get the update, that your brain gets the update, and suddenly it's going to unlock and go, now I know what to do with this through zero FM and this cross modulation and this extremely complex modulator that I bought over here that reads light waves or something. You know what I mean? And like suddenly your brain unlocks and goes, now I get it. And like the likelihood of that happening is much slimmer than you just picking stuff that already sounds good and works right away and kind of is a little bit more approachable. And I love all the people who make all this super weird stuff, but I feel like that stuff is for people who are already at that level. So I really want to tell people to not get sucked into the hype of the weird stuff and stick with the more basic stuff if you are still at a newer fundamental level with synthesis, because that other stuff is so hard to use and get useful stuff from. Hopefully this is all making sense. This is, I'm just talking at the camera right now, and I appreciate everybody for hanging out and sitting through the discussion. This is my Dub Techno case. I want to make a whole entire set on this case. So there's another topic that I think is interesting before we have to go, because I do have to go already. Building a case where you can actually play a set in the case, that's super hard. This is really hard. I meet a couple of people. I mean, I've been running a live hardware electronic music show for years. I mean, I've taken a step back nowadays. I don't want to say that like I'm still doing it. I'm doing it a lot less. I do it mostly from the keyboard warrior for the shows at this point. But running these events for years, hardware electronic music explicitly, tons of Eurorack performers that come and do these things. So I've seen a lot of different setups. And I see a lot of cases where they play an entire set on a single modular case. Sometimes smaller than this, sometimes much larger than this. But even if it is larger or smaller than this, the fact of the matter of them being able to do that at all is a testament to their skill level and the ability to understand the art form of building a Eurorack case that works. And it is an extremely hard task to do, and it requires a massive amount of time and honestly a huge investment to get to a place where you understand it. I do think hiring somebody who knows what they're doing, aka me, you can hire me and I'll help you build your case, talk to you about modules, and we can discuss that kind of stuff, which is EZBOT.live, by the way, if you're interested in that. I've done that a lot. But I do think like talking to people, being a part of a community, joining forums, asking a lot of questions. This is really important stuff. Asking people with a lot of experience and taking their honest feedback into account and not getting swept up in the cerebral side of the Eurorack synthesizer stuff and getting swept up in the art of making a good sounding synth. I think that's really important. And, I think that's really important. Making it make a good sound, being really approachable and really playable. If it's not fun, you're not going to make music. Straight up. If the case is not fun, you're not going to make good sounding music. The good music comes from the enjoyment of making it. That's where good music comes from. A guitar player makes great sounding licks because they love how it feels to play. That's a fact. I love playing with my Electron gear, and I like the sounds that I make when I play my Electron gear. And when I'm in the mode, You know, when I get into that groove, I make good music. You got to build a case that does that is really hard. I'm not gonna lie, it is a really tough exercise. But I've taken my experience in this current case and made something that I think is very usable. Bleepy bloopy sounds, chord progressions, great sounding effects, complex oscillator with a nice analog filter, simple modulation where I can control it, a sequencer that can do drums and melody well and launches clips and can save patches, a sampler so that I have any sound that I need for just background filler, loops, good drum sounds, takes up less space and does a good job, and a mixer that allows me to have EQs and record and all sorts of stuff. It's really just about a smaller footprint for this mixer for me. Otherwise, I wouldn't use it. I think it's fine. I think it's a great mixer, but otherwise I would use something with hands-on control because I like to improvise with volumes and stuff, and I can't really do that as much here. I think that stuff is really important. I hope you enjoyed my TED Talk on building a Eurorack case. Some of it got a little sideways as I got distracted by my dog knocking on my studio or whatnot, but I want to talk more about modular synthesis. I want to show off more modular stuff. I want to talk more about these deeply opinionated topics that I have or thoughts that I have, and hopefully I don't piss too many people off, or hopefully I make more friends than enemies with these discussions. That is always the goal. And, you know, I just really want to tell people to get out of their own way, enjoy the process, pick things that are fun, use other people's work as an example that works for you. When you see a Eurorack video on YouTube and it looks dope and they're making great sounds, take that into account. They figured something out. If you're not having the same success as them, then, you know, consider what they're doing and try and apply some of those techniques to yourself, just like you would when you're trying to learn something on another instrument. You know, you see what is Jimi Hendrix doing when he plays guitar, besides playing left-handed? Like, how, you know what I'm saying? Practice other people's technique. Take that into account. That's what I have done. Also, think about the build out on a Groovebox, for instance. What does a good Groovebox have, right? How many tracks does it have? How many synthesizers does it have? How many drum tracks does it have? Stuff like that. Can you build something like that in your case? If you want to build a Groovebox, that makes sense. Anyway, I think you guys are great. I love these live streams. I love having a discussion about this. Yes, this is my Dub Techno case. Yes, I think it sounds absolutely fantastic. And I love the modules that are in it. Focused equals fun. That's right, dude. All right, folks. I did say I had to keep it really short. I really want to talk more. Honestly, I have so much to say about this, and the conversation that we could have with the chat could make us go forever. And so we need to revisit this topic. There's no doubt. And we do need to revisit this case because I really want to talk about why the Odessa module is here. I wanted this module from Chaos. I worked it out with them because I wanted it. So I'm excited that they hooked it up. It wasn't like they're pushing this on me. I wanted this, so I'm excited to talk about why I wanted an additive oscillator and what it means to have oscillators like this. It's an oscillator that doesn't need a filter. And I want to talk about that discussion. How many oscillators, I mean, when you think of a Eurorack or a modular synth, you usually think of oscillator, filter, amplifier, effects, right? Here, I'm just thinking oscillator, amplifier, and effects, but no filter, because that doesn't need a filter. Additive synthesizers don't really need filters. You can use them, of course, but they don't really need them. And I think that's a really fun topic for us to discuss. Like, what? Oscillators without filters? Why? you know, and what other oscillators in Eurorack format kind of fall into that territory. I'd say like maybe like the Zaps module and stuff. Other complex oscillators really do a good job of that. FM synthesis, FM synthesis, stuff like that. You're the best. If you want lessons, it's patreon.com/EZBOT. EZBOT.live is another way you can get lessons from me. If you want to get my Octatrack performance templates, patreon.com or coffee.com/EZBOT. Visit modbang.com. That's my music store. That's where I sell these patch cables right here. You can buy these patch cables. These, I designed them myself. They glow in the dark, except for the transparent ones. They're ultra slim, ultra gummy. They're really cool, and they're not like super expensive or anything. They are just normal price. And great patch cables. I sell them right out of my home here and get them over to you as fast as I possibly can, including these 3.5 stereo TRS transparent cables. Tons of stuff I have. Light up LEDs. Really cool stuff. I encourage you to go check out the site and see if there's anything there you like. I appreciate you all, and thank you for listening to my discussion on building a case. I will come back with even more hardened thoughts to share with you. Everybody have a great time, and make some music today, would you?